Some people think that video games have become too easy and that gamers have lost their challenge-seeking spirit in recent years. However, there are several recent games that are still very difficult and can be a true test of skill. Here are some of the most challenging games you'll ever play. So without wasting more time, let's get into the video. Lies of P presents a unique take on the Souls-like genre, a subgenre often known for its brutal difficulty, yet typically not as unforgiving as the games they draw inspiration from. However, Lies of P is an exception to that rule, blending elements of Bloodborne and Sekiro into a game that challenges players with punishing mechanics. The game heavily emphasizes parrying, but enemies often attack in unpredictable patterns. If you fail to land your parry with perfect timing, your weapons degrade, adding an extra layer of challenge. And speaking of challenge, some bosses are incredibly tough with multiple stages that often make the fight feel like two battles in one, which can get overwhelming after a while. The combat is well crafted and feels satisfying, proving that the developers knew exactly what they were doing when designing the game. The bosses have multiple phases and attacks that can wipe you out in seconds if you're not careful. But the reward for defeating these bosses is worth it. Not only do you progress in the story, but you also get valuable loot and experience. While the game has received a patch to ease the difficulty somewhat, I played the release version, which was notoriously hard. It's clear that the developers set out to make this a tough experience, and they succeeded. Compared to the original game, Darkest Dungeon 2 is considered to be even more challenging. While it's debatable whether it's truly harder than the first game, one thing is certain, that Darkest Dungeon 2 is extremely difficult. There are several reasons for this increased difficulty. For example, healing is less available than in the original game, and players start with weaker characters. Although the combat system has been improved to eliminate random misses, the game has become more challenging in other ways. Unlike many other games where you can brute force your way through fights, here you must think ahead, anticipate enemy moves, and adapt your strategy constantly. One mistake can cost you the entire run. Every choice matters, and every defeat teaches you something. Success feels truly rewarding because you have to fight hard for it. But sometimes, no matter how well you plan, things can spiral out of control. Watching your heroes slowly lose their minds while knowing there's nothing you can do is a painful but fascinating experience. Additionally, the game's death protection feature is less effective without certain upgrades, resulting in more frequent character losses, especially in the early stages. It's a game where you will lose many times, but each failure teaches you something new. If you enjoy games that push you to your limits and force you to adapt, this is a must-play.
And vexation.
Celeste is a platformer game that may appear to be a typical indie game at first glance. However, its gameplay is extremely challenging and demanding. The game starts off easy, but the difficulty level increases rapidly with precise platforming challenges that can be brutal. What sets Celeste apart is its approach to handling player failure. Instead of criticizing the player for dying, the game encourages perseverance. The game even keeps track of the player's deaths in a way that is motivating rather than discouraging. The levels are tough, and they get harder as you progress. You'll have to dodge lasers, spikes, and moving platforms while executing perfect jumps and dashes. The game tests your reflexes, patience, and determination, but it never feels impossible. It always gives you the tools you need to succeed if you're willing to put in the effort. The platforming is so precise that every move matters, and every little improvement feels like a victory. While the game's difficulty is not for the faint of heart, its presentation makes it a good introduction to challenging games for new players. However, players who are not experienced with very difficult games such as Kaizo Mario levels may find Celeste to be extremely tough. Overall, Celeste is a merciless game that requires skill and persistence to complete. It's impossible to talk about challenging games without mentioning Elden Ring. Released in 2022, it became a massive success and is widely praised, but it's also known for being incredibly difficult. The open-world design does make the game feel slightly more forgiving compared to previous Souls-like games, as players can explore other areas if they get stuck. From the very first major boss, Margit the Fell Omen, to what many consider the most difficult boss in the series Millennia, Elden Ring doesn't hold back. Players who struggled for hours on Margit early in the game might think it can't get harder, but the difficulty actually increases as you progress with the toughest fights saved for the end. Before its release, there were concerns that the game might be too easy compared to previous games in the series. However, these concerns were unfounded, as the game proves to be just as challenging as its predecessors. Despite these factors, Elden Ring remains a very difficult game that does not hold back. The game's optional areas, such as the heroes' tombs, are particularly notorious for their cruelty, and even experienced players may find themselves struggling to progress. Overall, Elden Ring is a game that is not for the faint of heart, and players should be prepared for a significant challenge. I could have easily filled the entire list with roguelikes, but that wouldn't quite be fair. The essence of the genre is that the games are so tough you need multiple attempts to master the mechanics. Returnal includes some of these elements, but compared to games like Hades, which gives a steady stream of upgrades, Returnal is a bit different. It mainly offers weapon unlocks and movement abilities, but it doesn't focus heavily on persistent upgrades. When you die, you lose all your progress in a given run and the game resets. However, you don't lose everything. You keep certain upgrades, but you still have to fight through the challenges again. What sets Returnal apart is its combination of a big-budget first-party feel with the gameplay of an old-school shooter. You move at high speeds, dodging bullet patterns, and taking on fast, mobile enemies. You'll face off against a wide range of alien creatures, each more dangerous than the last. Cillian's main weapon is a transforming gun that can change into different types of firearms. Ammo is limited, and you'll need to think strategically to manage resources, choose when to fight, and when to run. The sheer number of enemies and the way they attack can overwhelm you if you're not careful. Even on lower difficulty levels, you'll find yourself struggling to make progress, which only adds to the satisfaction of finally conquering a tough section. Spelunky 2, released in 2020, is a roguelike game known for its extreme difficulty. The game takes the challenging gameplay of the original Spelunky and makes it even harder. The high level of randomization and deadly obstacles in the game make it very difficult to progress. Even small mistakes can lead to serious consequences, such as being thrown into a trap or losing important items. This can be frustrating, especially when trying to complete the first level. When you die, you lose everything and have to start over. There are no checkpoints, no saves, and no easy way out. Unlike modern games that offer tutorials and hints, Spelunky 2 expects you to figure everything out on your own. You have to learn enemy behaviors, discover secret mechanics, and master movement without any guidance. I found that completing the first game was not enough to prepare me for the sequel. It took a long time to get used to the first area called the Dwelling, and the game only gets harder from there. Spelunky 2 seems to be designed for players who have already mastered the first game. It is a challenging sequel that may be overwhelming for new players. While experienced players may enjoy the challenge, others may find it too difficult and frustrating. Think of it as a mix between Hotline Miami and Doom Eternal. It's similar to Superhot, but without the ability to stop time entirely. Even with its time stop feature, Superhot is a challenging game, so imagine how tough Ghostrunner can be. You do have the ability to slow down time before performing a perfect dodge, but using it effectively in combat can be tricky. One stray bullet is enough to take you down, so you'll need to stay on your toes. If you're someone who enjoys a challenge, this game will test your patience and skill. The fast combat system means you need to react in seconds, and one mistake can send you back to the beginning of a level. The game isn't a roguelike, and enemy placements stay the same every time, so early on you'll rely on memorization to overcome encounters. However, as you progress, the game starts to feel more intuitive and things begin to click. While death is constant, the game becomes a bit easier over time, only for the difficulty to ramp up again with tougher challengers. Ghostrunner is a game where dying is part of the experience, but thankfully, loading times are quick, making it a little easier to jump back in after each death. Puzzle games can be just as challenging as action games and platformers. The difficulty level depends on how well a player can think and solve problems. I enjoy playing puzzle games from time to time. For example, I completed The Witness with some effort, but Baba Is You is a different story. This game is about changing rules. It starts as a simple word puzzle, but it becomes a complex problem-solving exercise similar to learning programming. The puzzles in Baba Is You are very hard, and there are many of them. Even experienced puzzle players like myself can find it difficult to progress. The flexibility in the game's rule system makes it both fun and difficult. As you progress, the puzzles get more difficult, and you'll need to use clever logic and out-of-the-box thinking to solve them. The game doesn't give you much direction, which adds to the challenge, but it also rewards creativity and problem-solving skills. There's a huge sense of accomplishment when you finally crack a tough puzzle, and it's the kind of game that keeps you coming back for more. At some point, it can be overwhelming. However, players who enjoy puzzle games and are experienced in playing complex games may find Baba Is You less challenging. For others, it may seem impossible to complete. Sifu is a roguelike action game with some of the most intense, hard-hitting combat of like any game. It's massively unforgiving, and it really punishes any mistake that you make viciously, and it's really what makes the game so good. In Sifu, players go through multiple levels in a row. If they die, which happens often, they come back to life immediately, but their character ages. If the character gets too old, the game is over. To progress, players must either restart the level or the entire game. The game does not change between attempts, so the key to success is mastering the level layouts and combat system. The combat is tough because it requires precise timing and technique. Players have a parry move and 2 types of dodges: a hop to avoid low attacks and a duck to avoid high ones. Just learning when and where to dodge is a huge part of the game. When everything is going well, you feel like a non-stop flurry of violence like a Jackie Chan, a Jet Li, or a Donnie Yen, rather all of them rolled into one. But all it takes is one bad hit, and suddenly, the failures start to cascade. It's a game that could have easily been made without any roguelike enemies, but the challenge really does benefit the combat system. The only way to beat this game is to truly master it. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is widely considered the most difficult game developed by From Software. The main reason for this is the game's parry system, which requires players to master it in order to progress. Without mastering the parry system, completing the game is extremely challenging, if not impossible. The game's design is centered around the parry system, with tight timing and unpredictable enemy patterns. Even small mistakes can lead to failure, and the game's difficulty level is high throughout. Although the game allows players to revive, the challenge remains significant. Much has been said about the difficulty of the final boss, and for good reason. It is arguably From Software's most challenging fight ever, but the rest of the game is no walk in the park either. Even players who find most of Sekiro manageable often consider the final boss excessively difficult. If Sekiro is on another level compared to most games, its final boss is on another level compared to the rest of Sekiro. If you can master the parry system and adapt to its demanding mechanics, the game becomes an incredibly rewarding experience. However, if the timing and precision don't come naturally, finishing the game may feel impossible. It's brutal, unforgiving, and at times cruel, but the sense of accomplishment after defeating a boss you've struggled with for hours is unmatched. And that's all for today. If you love tough games that push you to your limits, give these a try and see how far you can go. Which of these have you played? Or do you have another super hard game in mind? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more gaming content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.